Good afternoon. Hi. Thanks for coming. I'm Dr. Ryder, and I teach sociology on North and South Campus, and I'd like to thank y'all for coming today to our Promise Day event. Just a few things before we start with our guest speaker. So make sure everyone signed the sign-in sheet, and you can also grab a t-shirt and other memorabilia that we have. So April is National Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so, along with Professor McElvaney, Instructor Tyler Flockhart, Instructor Paige Roseman, and Professor Kim Breivogel, we've been organizing events and activities surrounding awareness, prevention, education for sexual assault and sexual violence. So I'd like to thank y'all for coming. We're calling these our Promise Day events. So promise to listen, promise to be an advocate, promise not to celebrate or participate in cultural ideas and behaviors of sexualization, objectification, violence, and assault against women or anyone. Promise not to assault. So you'll see a lot of teal here. Our t-shirts and our other items are teal. Teal is a color chosen to represent sexual assault awareness. So if you're wearing a t-shirt or you have a button and someone asks what the teal is for, you can say, you can start the conversation and maybe some of the things that you learned today, you can contribute to this larger conversation. The National Sexual Assault Awareness Month slogan for this year is I ask, which is I ask for consent. So consent is never assumed, and it can always be revoked. You should never assume consent. Everyone should be willing. So before I hand this over to Instructor Tyler Flockhart, I'd like to recognize Charlie Core, Lieutenant Core of Wake Tech Police, who's been supporting us for years with these events. He's always great for all of these events we're doing, always so supportive. And our department head, Dr. Mike Chi, is here. He's been supportive since we started. And Dean Lewis is always willing to support us with everything we do. Okay, so I'm gonna hand this over to Tyler Flockhart. He's gonna introduce our guest speaker.
Hi everyone, I'm Tyler Flockhart. I'm an instructor in the sociology department, and I am just going to introduce our speaker for this event. Dr. Renee Lamphere is a professor of sociology and criminology at UNC Pembroke. And her research kind of very broadly looks at families and specifically family violence. And important for this event, she's here today to talk about sexual assault. She's also a sexual assault advocate. So I'm going to actually let her kind of tell you her story, and I'm going to turn it over to her. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lamphere.
Gracious host for me the past 2 days. I've really enjoyed being on your beautiful campus. The students that I've met have been awesome, engaged, just wonderful. So thank you for the good experience so far. So I'm here with you today because I will say that for as outspoken as I am about my own experiences with sexual assault, it still takes me back a bit when I'm asked to do events like this. It kind of reminds me that I'm part of a special club, that I know that probably some of you are a part of this club too, and it's kind of a crappy club because we never asked to be a part of it. So we're here today because April is National Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but I'm particularly focused on sexual assault on college campuses, and I think that it's important that we first talk a little bit about the nature and the extent of sexual assault on college campuses before we get too far into anything. So first, women ages 18 to 24 are at an elevated risk of sexual violence. Among undergraduate students, approximately 23% of all female undergrads, that's about 1 in 4, and 5.4% of all male undergrads will experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation. And when we hear statistics like this, about 23% of women are in 1 in 4, we have to also always keep in mind that these statistics are underinflated, that there are a number of people who are survivors that don't report. It's estimated that only about 20% of female college students who are victims report it to law enforcement. So that means 80% are not reporting. Recently, I was at a conference and I heard a term that I had heard lots of times in my career, but I heard it in a different way. Has anyone ever heard of the freshman 15? So when you think of the freshman 15, what do you think of? Gaining weight, right? You don't eat very well your first year of college and you're away from your parents and maybe you're not exercising as much and you gain a little bit of weight. But actually in this research article that I was reading, the freshman 15 now has another definition. It refers to the period of time between students' arrival on campus and Thanksgiving, about 15 weeks for most schools. Research shows that female students, particularly freshmen, are at an increased risk of being sexually assaulted during this time period. So given the increased risk of victimization, it's important that we have conversations like the one we're going to have today about sexual violence. So today I'm going to share my story with you. Before I share my story, I want to give you a little bit more about my background. So I'm from a very small town in upstate New York. My town is called Middleville. At the last US Census, there was a little less than 600 people there. We have one light that blinks yellow and red, and you can't get gas after 9 o'clock. And I did my undergrad at SUNY Oswego in upstate New York. I was about 2 hours away from home. And I ended up graduating with two majors, with communication studies and criminal justice, and I went on to get my master's and my PhD in criminology. But I actually started off my career as a music education major. I wanted to be a band director. So band director, criminology, that seems like kind of a big jump. How did I make that leap? Well, in addition to the criminal justice courses I teach, I also teach Introduction to Sociology. And in that course, we talk about the butterfly effect. Is anyone familiar with the butterfly effect? Basically, what the butterfly effect says is that small changes and small things, events that happen, can have large, bigger effects later on. So that the flap of a butterfly's wings on one side of the earth could cause a hurricane on the other side of the earth. So in teaching, I've often reflected back on one decision that I've made, one decision that totally changed the direction of my life. And a few years ago, when I first came out with my story, it was for an event called The Last Lecture, and I referred to this situation as the best $2 that I never spent. So I want to tell you about these $2 that I didn't spend and how not spending these $2 changed my life. I want to preface the story by saying that I personally by no means condone drinking among college students, particularly among underage college students. But I want to be able to tell this story with the honesty that it needs to be told if I didn't tell you that alcohol was involved, and if I didn't tell you that underage drinking was involved with this. So basically, I'm just going to tell you what happened. The best $2 I never spent. So it was about the third week of September. I had been at school for a little over a month, and I had a roommate. Her name was Diana, and there was a couple other girls in our hallway. We always used to hang out, and the town where I went to school was known for having a lot of bars. Like totes itself as being like the most bars per capita. That's what Oswego is known for. And there's this one particular bar that they told us about where you could go and you could drink underage. They said you don't even have to have a fake ID or anything. Just show them your ID and they'll let you in. So we went a couple weeks before. We tried it out, we checked it out. I gave them my ID, they gave me a wristband, and I was drinking. They didn't think twice about it. So fast forward to the night that everything happened. We were out and there was this guy who lived in town. He didn't go to school at Oswego. He was what we referred to as a townie. He lived in town but didn't go to school. So this townie, his name was Victor, he'd been hanging around with us and my roommate for a couple of weeks when we had been out. And I knew that my roommate had a pretty big crush on him. So we're all drinking, having a good time, dancing. It gets to be the end of the night, the bar is closing, and it's time for us to go back to the dorms. So the cab fare was $10 to get back to the dorms. It was $2 per girl. There was 5 girls that were getting in the van. And as I'm getting ready to step in the van, Victor says to me, hey, you don't need to take that van ride, I'll give you a ride home. I'm thinking to myself, well, I won't have to spend the $2 then. This is great, I'll get a free ride home. So I told the girls I'm getting a ride home. They were all drunk, they got in the van, they didn't really care what happened, what was going on. I can't say that I blame them. And he said he was gonna bring me home. Well, then he said, no, we need to stop at my aunt's house. I need to let her dog out. Okay, so we'll stop at your aunt's house. We get there, well, why don't you come in? Okay, this is weird, but I'll keep playing along. I'll keep going. So I came in. Well, do you want a tour of the house? Okay. After we tour the downstairs, do you want a tour of the upstairs? Sure, okay. And it wasn't too long after we got upstairs in the upstairs bedroom that I realized that I was no longer free to leave that situation. And over the course of the next several hours, I was raped and sexually assaulted. So the next morning, he drove me back to the dorms, and as I was getting ready to get out of the car, he grabbed my wrist and he said, you know Diana likes me, right? That my roommate had a crush on him. And I said, yeah, I know that. He said, she'd be pretty mad if she found out that we had sex, right? And I said, yeah, she probably would be. He said, we should probably keep this between us then, right? And I said, yeah, we probably should. And I got out of the car and went to my room. And I showered, and I was very sexually inexperienced during that time period. I didn't really know too much about sex, but I remember hearing about Plan B, and that was something you could do if you had unprotected sex. So I had the wherewithal to go to the health center, and I was sitting in front of a medical professional, and a medical professional asked me, what happened? And at that point, you're thinking to yourself, you just got raped. Somebody's asking you what happened, a medical professional, this is where you say what happened. But I'll tell you, I couldn't get those words out of my mouth. The only thing that I could come up with was me and my boyfriend, I didn't have a boyfriend, but me and my boyfriend were having sex and the condom broke. And she said, okay, and she gave me Plan B. And I went back to class, and that was it. I tried to tell myself that I could forget about it. I think too, I really, in general, I'm a person that I attribute blame a lot to myself. Like if bad things happen around me, I have a way of blaming it on myself. So I really blamed myself for that situation. I couldn't, I was out, I was underage drinking, I left my girlfriends, I went with a stranger, I went into his house. I knew I didn't feel comfortable, and I ignored my gut. I felt so guilty about what I had done. So I really struggled. I started drinking more. I stopped going to class. My first semester, my GPA, I was on academic probation. My second semester, and in that second semester, I built up the courage where I decided that I was finally going to tell someone. So I decided, and I'll tell you who I told now, especially because we've reconciled since then. But at the time, it was my father. And I told my father about what had happened to me, and my father didn't believe me. His words to me were that you couldn't rape people who were willing. So I took all those months building up all that courage. I told someone, and the first person I told didn't believe me. So I just shut down from there, and I said, if he doesn't believe me, then nobody's ever going to believe me, and I'm just not going to tell people. But I also, that anxious part of me sometimes leads me to be driven. And I started to become more curious. Are there other people like me? What are people's experiences? What happened to me? What should I have done? What can other people do? So that next fall, I took an Introduction to Criminal Justice course, and I was introduced to victimology. I was introduced to stories of survivors, and it became very empowering. And then that following spring, I had a friend who was sexually assaulted by one of our acquaintances, and I encouraged her to go to the police, and I sat with her at the police station. I sat with her at the hospital when she got her rape kit done. I went with her to court when the trial proceeded forward, and I helped my friend to make it through the criminal justice system. And I guess that's when I kind of realized maybe while I didn't have the courage at that time to come forward for myself and advocate for myself, then maybe I could be an advocate for other people. And that is when I changed my major from music to criminal justice and decided that I was going to be a college professor and that I was going to teach people about sexual assault and sexual violence with the hopes of prevention. Not even looking at my notes. So I kept my victimization a secret for 13 years. I didn't really tell anybody. And then in April of 2013, I was asked to give a lecture at my university. It was called The Last Lecture, and it was an award that I had won. And they told me that the only prompt I had was that I had to address a group of students, and I had to pretend like it would be the last time I was addressing a group of students. So if this was the last time you were going to talk to students, what would you tell them? And I decided in the weeks leading up to the last lecture, okay, this is what's going to happen. I'm gonna tell everybody in this lecture. So I made my lecture, and on the day I gave my lecture, I told my story. And after I got done telling my story, I was like, whew. And the whole audience clapped for me, and that was one of the greatest moments of like my adult life. Because for a really long time, I had in my mind built it up that if I told this audience full of people that they were going to laugh at me, that they weren't going to believe me, that they were going to be like, oh, just another person telling her story. But it was so empowering to have that many people show me so much love and support. And so when I think about that $2 that I didn't spend, for a really long time, that $2 haunted me. I just couldn't believe it. $2 you could have avoided that whole situation. I told myself at one point that I would pay $2 every hour, every day for the rest of my life if I could undo that situation that happened to me. But as I get farther removed from that situation and I get closer and closer to where I am now, my mind has changed. Because if I had spent those $2 and I had gone home with those girls that night, sure, I wouldn't have been sexually assaulted. But if I hadn't been sexually assaulted, I wouldn't have taken that criminal justice class. I wouldn't have changed my major to criminology. I wouldn't have gone on to graduate school to get my degree in criminology. I wouldn't have taken the job at Pembroke. I wouldn't have met Dr. Ryder. I literally wouldn't be standing here in front of you today if it wasn't for that $2 that I didn't spend. So, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't pay anything to undo what happened. What happened has changed me and shaped me molded me into who I am today. So when I say it's the best $2 I never spent, I literally mean it's the best $2 I never spent. And it makes me feel very just grateful and humbled to be able to stand here in front of you all today and tell you that. So, something else that has been a catalyst, so after I came out in 2013, so you come out to an audience full of people, what do you do from there? And so I knew that I wanted to tell people that were close to me. I wanted to tell more friends and more family members, and I figured a good place to do that would be social media. And what really was a catalyst for me and was really important in my own coming out story, and this is actually how Dr. Ryder got to, we're friends on Facebook, and I'm friends with her sister on Facebook, and I told my story on Facebook, and that's how they got the idea to have me come and speak to you today. I was really empowered by the Me Too movement when that happened in 2017. So, who here is familiar with the Me Too movement? Almost everybody. So, just a little bit about it for those of you that aren't familiar with it. It gained popularity in 2017, but the origins of the Me Too movement actually go back to 2006 to a black scholar named Tarana Burke, who promoted the phrase on her MySpace page. But in recent times, we saw it tweeted in October 15th, 2017 by Alyssa Milano. She encouraged people to put their status on social media as Me Too to give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. By the end of the day that she made the post, October 15th, it had more than 200,000. It had been used more than 200,000 times and tweeted 500,000 times by the next day. On Facebook, the hashtag was used by more than 4.7 million people and in 12 million posts in the first 24 hours. They did some research about how far the Me Too movement affected people on Facebook, and they found that 45% of all Facebook users in the US had at least one friend who posted using the term. So tens of thousands of people have come forward, including hundreds of celebrities who have come forward with their Me Too stories, both male and female. We've seen some of the backlash to that in Hollywood. But in addition to Hollywood, we've seen it spark interest in sciences, academia, and in politics. And in particular, I have been fascinated with Me Too in academia, really centered around this idea of disclosure. So when I started disclosing to students in 2013, I started to regularly disclose to students in all of my classes. So whether it's content related or it's just something that I bring up at some point during the semester, undoubtedly at some point during the semester it usually ends up coming up. So I started to wonder, are there other professors like me? Or am I weird and alone in doing this? So last year, myself, along with Dr. Shelley Clevenger at Illinois State University and Dr. Kim Cook at UNC Wilmington, we started a research study on Me Too professors, other college professors who were experiencing things that we had experienced. And in particular, we were interested in their decision to disclose that information to their students. So we advertised our study on social media. We advertised it through a number of listservs. And as of last week, we had completed over 50 qualitative interviews with professors who reported that they were victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment. We've talked to instructors that have been teaching for one semester, and we've talked to instructors and professors who had taught for over 50 years. So we have a really wide range of professors that we've talked to. We've spoken to male professors, female professors, transgender professors, professors of all different ages, ethnicities, races, you name it, we've talked to them. And what's some of the common things that we found? Well, first, I'm pleasantly surprised and happy to know that I am not alone and that there are a lot of professors like me, most of our sample actually, are professors like me who have experiences with sexual violence, and they do choose to share that with their students. Sometimes it's much like I do. They'll just share it at the beginning of the semester. Sometimes they share it depending on the content that they're delivering. And we ask them what kind of feedback they've gotten from their students about it, and what they've told us is that they've overwhelmingly have gotten positive feedback from their students. So we're very excited about the preliminary results of this study and what we think we're going to be able to do with it, but we're hoping that it will encourage more professors that are like us to come forward and know that there are a network of people who are experiencing the same things that they have experienced. So, hold on a second, I lost my train of thought. Here it is. So something that I wanted to kind of finish this second part of this speech and talk to you about today is there are some of you that, maybe some of you, nothing has ever happened to you and have no experiences with this. Maybe some of you have experiences, but you haven't told anybody about it. Maybe some of you have experiences and you shared on social media, or you're going to share on social media. And so it's kind of, you might be thinking to yourself, what happens to you after you share? What happens after you come out and tell your story? What happens when you become an advocate? And so I wanted to share some of the things that have happened with me so you can know and maybe get some assurance about how things might happen if you decide that you want to come forward. I think the most important thing that you should know is that you are probably, and I might be wrong, these are my experiences, but from my personal experiences, you are going to be overwhelmed by the amount of love and support that you receive from your friends and family. It truly is humbling and overwhelming at times how much support I get from people moving forward in this endeavor. I spent so long thinking that no one would believe me, and now that I've told my story, all I get from people is, yes, we do believe you, yes, you're heard, yes, you're understood. I talked to my roommate, Diana, the one from my story. Because she didn't find out at the time exactly what happened, but she heard through the grapevine that I had had sex with Victor, and so she was very, very mean to me, and she decided she didn't want to be my friend anymore, and it was a very ugly end to that friendship. And she listened to my lecture that I had given. She listened to it on YouTube, and she reached out to me on social media a few years ago to let me know what a jerk he was, to let me know that she's sorry that anything ever came between our friendship. She's sorry for ever doubting me, and that she believed me. And that was a very powerful, healing moment for me. I also reconciled with my father since coming out. I don't think my dad even necessarily realized. He didn't remember saying it, so he certainly didn't recognize the impact that it had on me. And I have since then, I more than forgive him, and he's asked for my forgiveness, and I forgive him 100 times over. But it wasn't until I came out that I was able to have those difficult conversations and start to get that peace that I needed moving forward. Once you do decide to come forward, you learn that it can be a teachable moment for people, and it can be a learning moment for other people. There are some things that people can learn from my story that I went through. You can learn that you should trust your gut. If your gut tells you that something is wrong, if your gut tells you that you shouldn't be in a situation, don't ignore your gut feelings. And another lesson that can be learned is that if a survivor decides to choose you to be the person to come out to and tell their story to, you should be there for them, and you should believe them, and you should listen to them, and you should be a supportive ear for them. I've heard countless stories over the years of students that are making better decisions or have made decisions after hearing my story. I actually just yesterday, I gave this similar lecture on your other campus, your South campus, and I had a student come up to me afterwards and tell me that they were going to, that they had an acquaintance that was sexually harassing them, and that they were going to confront the person about sexually harassing them and let them know that it wasn't okay. And she said that she felt like she had the courage after hearing my story. Right there, my whole trip to Raleigh, worth it, right? Day made, week made, month made. I mean, and that's just one person. So I keep telling my story because I know it's a learning moment, because I know it's a teachable moment. And if you decide to, ever come forward and publicly tell your story, it can be a learning and teachable moment for other people too. Another thing that happens when you come out is that people will look to you as an ally. They look at you and they say, this person understands who I am and where I'm coming from, and I want to share that with them. It's empowering to hear the stories of other people's survival. It truly is amazing to see how strong the human spirit is and how much people can overcome and endure. But it's also a double-edged sword, I will tell you that. When you hear from so many people, it brings the reality of the situation right to your doorstep. And something that makes it hard for me as a professor is that, especially a professor that's so open about it, is that students, they want to come to me and they want to confide in me, but at the end of the day, I am not a therapist. And at the end of the day, we have Title IX measures on our campus, and you can't tell me that you were sexually assaulted and then leave my office without me telling someone. I just can't do that. That's against the law for me to do that. So, having to be very upfront with students that, yes, I do want you to come to me. Yes, I do want you to feel comfortable coming to me. Yes, I'm glad my story has empowered you. But at the same time, I can't bear your secrets. I can't be the bearer of your secrets. I can give you resources and I can help you move forward. But I will say that, and at times it can be very draining, especially after the Me Too, the first time with the Me Too movement, when I had just simply stated Me Too, and then I put a link to my last lecture video. I would say within 24 hours, I had 10 different people reaching out to me, telling me about their stories of sexual assault. when 10 people in a 24-hour period tell you about being sexually assaulted, it's very overwhelming. It can be draining. But at the end of the day, it's way more rewarding and it's way more meaningful than it is anything else. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And then something else too that I've kind of had to deal with after, as a result of my victimization, is talking to potential romantic partners about what happened to me. As a result of my victimization, I have some intimacy issues. There are some places and some ways that I don't like being touched. I don't like being held. And sometimes even a tight embrace from a partner can trigger a bad memory from me if I'm being hugged too tightly. And so you have to let people know, I at least have to let people know up front before I can have any level of intimacy with them that I have these problems. And I've dated, along the years, I dated quite a few people. I had to kiss a lot of frogs before I found my prince. And, sometimes you tell people and they're not cool about it, and they're not supportive, and they don't understand. But something that I remember whenever I've been rejected as a result of that is something that my grandmother, she's told me and she continues to tell me. She says, Renee, some people in life won't like you, and that's okay. Just remember, these people are not your people. And cling to the people that do love you. Most of the relationships where they were not receptive to me, where they didn't want to, deal with my baggage that I came along with, I just let those people go because they weren't right for me. And when I met my now husband, Michael, he was the most caring, supportive, sensitive person I could have ever disclosed to. He thanked me for telling him and comforted me and let me know that I was believed and that he cared about me and that he would work to make sure I was always comfortable with him. But it took me 33 years to find the response I was hoping to get. So when it comes to telling your romantic partners about your victimization, do what makes you comfortable and know the person you are supposed to be with will never blame you or make you feel guilty about your victimization. So now that we've talked a little bit about my experiences as a survivor of sexual assault, I also want to take a minute and finish this discussion by talking a little bit about healing and what you can do as individuals moving forward. Healing and justice, you have to remember, look different for everyone. I've spoken with hundreds of survivors over the years, and no statement could ring more true. Healing is an ongoing process. It looks different for everyone, and everyone heals in their own time and in their own way. I will tell you, and we talked about this the colonel talked about, the lieutenant talked about this morning. What did you say? There are 3 types of people in this world: people who have been to therapy, are in counseling, people who have been to counseling, or people that need to go to counseling. I didn't get over this by myself. I'm still not 100% over it. I'm never going to be 100% over it. How do you get over something like that happens to you? But counseling and seeking out mental health services. When I first met my husband, he's never really been to counseling or anything like that, and it was maybe a month after of us dating, and I told him one day that I was going to see my counselor. And he said, he's like, why are you seeing a counselor? You don't seem like you need a counselor. And I gently reminded him that if I ever seem like I don't need a counselor, it's because I'm in really good counseling. So that's one thing that I want to add that I don't have written down that I wanted to share, is that there is no shame in getting help and getting therapy and getting the help that you need. Somebody also asked yesterday in the Q&A after the first presentation, they said, if you could, the man that victimized me, his name is Victor, they said, if you could say anything to Victor, or if you saw him right now, what would you do? What would you say? And nobody had ever asked me that. And so I think it would probably be at first a bit of an unpleasant exchange. I would certainly want to let him know and be aware of how profoundly he impacted my life. But I would also let him know that I grew and I learned in spite of him. And I think that most importantly, though, what I would let him know is that I forgive him. And I know that some of you might be sitting there thinking, how could you ever forgive somebody that violates you in such an intimate way? And I just want to take a moment to remind you that forgiveness isn't about the person that you forgive. Forgiveness is about the person doing the forgiving. Me forgiving him doesn't mean he gets a pass for what he did. What he did was really, really terrible. But me forgiving him gives myself a pass and lets me say, I'm okay. I can live my life. I can go on and live another day because I've forgiven you. I've let that go. If I thought about him and I thought about the incident every day, I would drive myself crazy. I did that. I've been down that road. I did that before. So definitely I think that people were surprised to hear that I would say that I forgive him, but I do forgive him. For all of you survivors out there today, just please hear this and take it to heart. Remember that while you have been cracked by what happened to you, you are not broken. You survived. You are sitting here in a college classroom learning about sexual assault. You are stronger than you give yourself credit for. Don't ever compare my survival story to your survival story. Don't think that healing means that you have to come out and tell your story. There are many ways for you to heal. So what can you do to support survivors? I just want to remind you again that if you're not a survivor, we're talking about 1 in 3, 1 in 4 women. Chances are you know a survivor. And something that I've kind of alluded to today, but I want to make sure that we address directly, is the concept of victim blaming. So victim blaming is a devaluing act that occurs when the victim of a crime is held responsible in whole or in part for the crimes that have been committed against them. People victim blame for a number of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons that people victim blame is to distance themselves from some type of unpleasant or traumatic experiences, thereby confirming their own invulnerability to the risk. People reassure themselves by thinking, because I'm not like them, because I didn't do that, I'm not her, I wouldn't get in a van with people I don't know, I would have paid that $2. It's very easy to blame me and my situation and victims in their situation for the things that they did, because it's easy to think, well, that would never happen to me. But victim blaming attitudes marginalize the survivor, and it makes it harder for them to come forward and report. If the survivor knows you or society blames them for the assault, they will not feel comfortable coming forward and talking to you. Sometimes offenders will state things like, and I know this from being on conduct hearing boards on my campus where sexual assault cases are being heard. She was asking for it. A statement that shifts blame for the attack onto the survivor. As a society, we, especially women, have been bombarded with techniques on how to prevent being sexually assaulted. What are some of the techniques that you have heard of to stop yourself from being sexually assaulted? Don't drink too much, right? Watch what you drink. Take self-defense classes. But you gotta fight like to the death or it didn't happen. Don't dress too sexy. Don't walk alone at night. And of course, these aren't bad tips. I'm not saying that any of those, especially my own particular story, underage drinking, leaving my friends, going with a stranger. It's not like those are bad tips to give someone, but they give this false sense of security. They give this idea that if you're safe enough, that sexual assault is preventable. And at the end of the day, sexual assault, at least from a victim's perspective, is not preventable. You can't keep your drink safe enough. You can't wear, the unsexiest enough clothing. You can't walk with enough people to keep yourself safe. It makes people who are assaulted feel shameful and confused, and might make them feel like they should have done more to prevent the attack. So unfortunately, prevention techniques don't challenge the root cause of sexual violence. There is a difference between doing things that make you feel safe versus believing that if you take these precautions, that you have no chance of being assaulted. Offenders look for the right moment and choose to commit a sexual assault while justifying their actions. So even if you did take all precautions, you are never to blame for being sexually assaulted. And always remember this, if you're not a survivor. Remember that survivors are looking at you. Survivors are listening to you. They hear about what you have to say. They see what you post on social media. This really hit home to me during what they're calling the second wave of the Me Too movement, which was when Me Too became popular again in October 2018 during the confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh, the now Supreme Court Justice. One of my research participants in my study that I was talking about before, she described the Kavanaugh hearings as triggering AF. So if you're not familiar with that, that was when Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, a psychology professor at Palo Alto University, gave harrowing testimony accusing now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her while they were in high school. Kavanaugh, of course, vehemently denied the allegations and was reported to the Supreme Court. Now, whether you believe Justice Kavanaugh or Dr. Ford, that's a personal decision that's up to you. But I will tell you as someone who supports survivors that I believe Dr. Ford. And I believe that in her powerful testimony. And I have no reason to believe that that woman was lying or being untruthful in her testimony. So personally, while I understand that the argument was heated on both sides, I will say that something that I did was when I saw victim blaming on my social media, I called those people out and let them know exactly what they were doing, blaming the victim. At the end of the day, I believe that victim blaming is wrong and damaging to all survivors. And in all of this, out of all those people that were victim blaming, all I could think about was that these people have friends and family members that are survivors, and that these people are seeing their loved ones blame them and blame victims on social media. It really hurt my feelings. And just one more note on the Kavanaugh hearing. One of the biggest arguments against Dr. Ford was the fact that she had gone so many years and she had never reported it, and now that he was becoming Supreme Court Justice, now she was going forward. As somebody who's in not the same, but a similar position to her in that I was victimized at an earlier age in life and didn't report it, I will tell you that if I know the name of the person that sexually assaulted me, I will never forget his face. And if that SOB ever decides that he's going to run for Supreme Court Justice, I'm going to be the first person that's up on Capitol Hill letting everybody know my story and what happened to me. Even if it meant that I took the rage and criticism that Dr. Ford unfortunately received in the media. It's very telling though. After that happened, I thinned out my social media quite a bit. I just decided there were a lot of people that I no longer needed to be friends with or associate with, and I'm not going to, when people spread hate, same thing when someone posts something racist on Facebook, delete. Not friends with you anymore. You got to keep their circles small. Don't give them that platform to promote that hate. So you can be hateful, but you're not going to be hateful on my page, and you're not going to be hateful where I have to look at it. So that's just my 2 cents. So that's really all I have for you today, but I'm more than willing to answer questions now. I have my business card with me, so if afterwards, if anybody wants my information so we can email or anything like that, I'm more than willing to chat with anybody. But thank you so much for having me.
Do you have any questions for Dr. Lamphere?
Yeah.
I said I was going to be the one that doesn't talk. Have you ever had flashbacks? Do you know? Oh, thanks.
Okay. I do. Sometimes I have dreams, and they take me back there. And again, there are some I'm very, very weird about, different ways that I'm touched, different pressure points, different parts of my body that I don't like certain types of pressure, and that will trigger me and send me back. but it has, at least for me, it's gotten less and less with time. Yeah.
This is not really like a question, but I understand what you say that,
Okay. Not really. It's kind of loud. It's not really a question, but I understand when you say that the partner that you are with now is certain like positions or whatever that you don't really care too much for. Because when I went, I was molested, and when I went to get a physical in like high school, early high school, like I broke down and cried in front of my mom, and she was like, "Why are you crying?" I was like, "Because you remember when I was molested, I don't really like people touching me down there." So, but I'm glad I'm over that now. But I mean, I really do understand when you say that those, you don't really want anybody touching you in certain areas, because I'm still working with it because it's a trigger for me. But I mean, other than that, I understand what you're saying. That's it.
I'm the same way. I gynecological exams, like I have to have a friend or somebody in the room with me. I shake the whole time. And even my person I see, he's like the nicest person. Like I've been with him for 10 years, and I know I'm in a safe environment in my doctor's office, but there's just something about being so vulnerable like that that really makes me very anxious and makes me very upset. So thank you for sharing your story with us, and I totally understand where you're coming from.
Not too personal, why didn't you press charges?
Well, at first I was so sexually inexperienced, I think, that I didn't really I knew that something not right had happened to me, but I don't think I really necessarily understood it. And I was just more, I was 18. Would you have to say anything bad about 18-year-olds? I don't mean that in a bad way, but 35-year-old me and 18-year-old me are two different people. I was really concerned about my roommate finding out about it and her getting mad at me. I was worried. My parents were already not thrilled that I went away to school. I was afraid that if I told my parents that they were going to come and get me and make me drop out of school. There was a lot of things that I was worried about. And then when I told my dad, I guess I had, at that point, I had read Lucky by Alice Sebold. I don't know if anybody's ever read Lucky by Alice Sebold, but it's an amazing book, and it's a story about a woman who's sexually assaulted at college and her story and what she went through. And in Lucky, Alice's character, when she comes forward and she goes to the police, her parents are, very sympathetic. Her parents come meet her at the hospital. They come pick her up from college. So I guess I had it in my mind that I was going to tell my dad, and that my dad was going to hold me, and that, he was going to come and take me and take care of it and take care of it for me. And so then when I told him, and he was just like, "Well, you can't rape people that are willing." I was like, "What? What do you mean? You know what I mean?" I didn't even know what to say. I just cried, and then I just let it go. And if I couldn't, I just trusted him more than anything. And if he didn't believe me, I still to this day, I don't know why my dad said that. I don't know if it was just a bad moment that he was going through, because it's not like I was promiscuous or anything of that sort. I don't know what made him say that, but that was a complete system shutdown for me. And that was a shutdown for 12 years for me. Yeah.
Do you think everything happened for a reason, or do you think it's just like something that had to happen for you to change events, or?
Definitely. I think sometimes when you're going through stuff, you don't like hearing that everything happens for a reason, but things do happen. Sometimes it's not for a reason, it is what it is. And that experience, I literally wouldn't be looking you in the face, talking to you right now, if that experience didn't happen to me. I'd be a high school band teacher somewhere. So, it definitely, it's that changing my attitude about it has changed a lot for me, but it took me a really long time to get there. Okay, well, I will be around until everything's all done being broken down. If anyone wants to ask any questions or chat more with me.
We do have a few things.
Oh, yeah, they have a few things too.
Around for a few minutes. We want to thank Dr. Lamphere for sharing her story and for, answering questions and being so honest.